we want to bring you as much Pokemon action as we can. So being able to showcase all these matches gives you more to view and also gives our players the spotlight they deserve.
We will show you now the spotlights that the first two players will be deserving in this first round. We do have Thailand versus South Korea. It does seem like Thailand have taken that first point with a 1-0 against South Korea. Of course, we are still in Friday at the moment. We still have plenty of matches to go over this weekend.
Yeah, it's still very early doors. One match down. Thailand's obviously taken that win, and now there's still so much to play for. So we don't get to see kind of the different teams at this stage. But taking a look, I like the weather wall that I'm seeing there straight away.
Kyogre able to get the weather wall win over that Groudon there. We'll have to see if that's going to be a strategy that these players are going to be going forwards with into this top 8 match. So we can move on to see what the players are going to be bringing. It looks like it is going to be a Zacian coming out for South Korea and Sanghyeon here.
Yes, and I'm loving the Pokemon composition coming out here. First of all, got to shout out that Umbreon, one of those Pokemon that can come into a team, be super bulky, and really get up to some shenanigans. But the Pokemon that I really also want to talk about is that Politoed. You just talked about kind of having the Weather War and Kyogre being the primary rain setter at the moment in this kind of one restricted format. But having a little Politoed on there can bring the rain while still freeing up your restricted slot.
It's going to keep the Zacian safe from those fire-type attacks that could be launched at it. Also going to help out the Zapdos as well, going to make those Hurricanes 100% accurate. And yeah, Umbreon is a Pokemon it picked up in popularity when Dynamax was still around because it was able to take those max moves. Slightly fell off when we lost Dynamax, but still an incredibly viable Pokemon. It's going to pair well up against Pokemon like that Calyrex Shadow Rider that you always need some sort of check for, and it'll be able to shrug that off very easily. So yeah, very cool pick coming out for Sanghyeon, and we can move on to see what Thailand are going to be bringing forward into this match. They're going to be bringing an Yveltal here for Panyawut, so yeah, just going to be an interesting match between this Yveltal and Zacian.
Yeah, I haven't seen Yveltal in a very long time, so looking forward to seeing how it's going to come down in this restricted format. Of course, Regieleki, got to talk about how happy and delighted I am to see this Pokemon on the bench for now. And again, there's another Landorus here, and Landorus in that kind of incarnate form, it's risen in popularity a lot lately. Having that sheer force ability has just been allowed them to hit an even heavier punch, and just kind of substituting out Intimidate. I guess if you have a Pokemon like Incineroar, like you can see on this team here as well, you don't necessarily need to Intimidate, and having that sheer force kind of power can be what you actually need to pick up the KOs.
Yeah, it's always a toss-up of whether you want that really heavy hitting Earth power coming out from the sheer force, or you want to be going slightly bulkier with the Intimidates. And it seems like both players are opting for power here with both of their Landorus incarnates. So yeah, I'm very interested to see how this is going to pair up, especially with the Zacians really picking up in popularity, having access to play rough at this point. It's really going to hurt that Yveltal.
Yeah, and I think what you wanted to say is the power coming from Regieleki there, Jamie, not the Landoruses. But of course, Regieleki, that's a Pokemon that the Politoed's going to have to worry about. A lot of the other Pokemon on there as well don't want to take some of those big electric-type moves coming out from the Regieleki. But of course, Landorus is going to be able to switch in nicely and take those. Again, though, Zacian is one of these key Pokemon in this restricted format at the moment. And if it can get into a good position where it can start dealing some strong damage against the opposing team, then it's going to be able to shine really well.
You've got to really use that Regieleki and maybe the Amoonguss as well to be able to position that Landorus. Definitely is going to be the best way through the Zacian coming out here for the Yveltal team for Panyawut. So maybe the Sakataka, if it wants to get into Trick Room as well, you'll be able to get some really powerful Gyro Balls into the Zacian as well. But then that has to fear something like the opposing Landorus. The Politoed is going to be able to hit it very well as well. Politoed's going to do very well into the Pokemon that do well into the Zacian as well. Maybe not so much the Regieleki, you do have to keep that safe at least from those electric-type attacks. But going into the Stakataka and the Landorus Incarnate, it's going to be able to do some very good damage with the rain-boosted water-type attacks. And maybe you need to be relying on the Amoonguss to keep them safe, because if you're just Rage Powdering away those water attacks, not going to be too effective into the Stakataka or the Landorus. It does seem like there's a very easy way to get up Trick Room if required for Panyawut. If they go with the Amoonguss and the Stakataka, there's not going to be too many ways to be able to put a stop to that. You'd probably have to lead with the Rillaboom and the Landorus, or the Zacian as well, to just be able to get that fake out and then be able to pick up the knockout on the Stakataka. But if they make it through the first turn, still have that option available, you could be setting up Trick Room immediately.
Yeah, you're right. Trick Room definitely a solid strategy there. It's just making sure that you're able to utilize it well and not lose those turns, particularly if the Umbreon maybe wants to go for something like a Yawn, just put that Stakataka to sleep. Those Trick Room turns are going to go to waste. But leading out here, we're going to see the Yveltal and the Amoonguss jump out onto the field for Panyawut, and Sanghyeon is going to be leading out with the Zacian and that Umbreon.
So both restricteds immediately for both players here, and it's Amoonguss is going to be able to redirect the attacks away from the Zacian. It's going to be able to redirect the play rush that could come out from the Zacians, being able to resist that attack and free up the Yveltal somewhat. But Yveltal is not really going to be able to hit this Umbreon very well. Oblivion Wing would be its best attack to be able to deal with that, and that's still not really going to do too much damage, and you're not going to be doing too much damage to the Zacian either with the Dark type attacks. You'd have to be carrying something like Heat Wave to be able to do some good damage to the Zacian. Foul Play would still chunk it a lot because of that increased attack it gets from the Intrepid Sword. So if the Amoonguss is able to survive this turn, usually it's able to survive something like a Behemoth Blade coming from the Zacian, then you could get a Spore off into either the Zacian or the Umbreon at this point. Whether you want to put a stop to the massive damage that could be coming out from the Zacian or the tricky stuff that the Umbreon could be going for, but it's actually going to be switching straight out into the Incineroar instead.
Yeah, no spores, no redirection coming out from Amoonguss, just preserving itself for later in the game. The Intimidate is going to come out though and obviously negate that Intrepid Sword boost, but Inner Focused on the Umbreon is just going to render that useless. Zacian, however, capitalizing on this, setting up a substitute as Yveltal does go for the Foul Play. Can obviously go straight into that decoy there. Going to be able to take not very effective damage, but enough to break the substitute there. So Taunt going to come out from that Umbreon as well. That would have been great if the Amoonguss was still there, going to be able to shut down any of those status attacks, but instead Incineroar's going to be able to take that.
Still puts a stop to the parting shots at least, though, so the Incineroar would have to switch in the old-fashioned way if it wanted to switch out at this point. It still has the fake-out pressure onto the Zacian. You have intimidated it now, so it is back to neutral. Your foul plays are going to be doing a little bit less damage, but still strong enough to break the substitute. If that Intimidate would have allowed the Zacian to be able to survive the foul play, or the substitute would have been able to survive the foul play, the Zacian would have been in a fantastic position, because it would have been immune to the fake-out that could have come out from the Incineroar, but it did manage to still break it, so you are able to be able to fake out that Zacian, and it's not going to be taking any of that. It's going to be switching straight out.
You're right, that's very good knowledge to have, knowing that the Foul Play will be able to pick up the KO. But Zacian is going to go back to its Pokeball, be able to reset its Intrepid Sword for later on, and the Restricted on the opposing side is also going to retreat in favor of that Amoonguss. Foul Play coming up from the Umbreon, going into the Amoonguss, going to deal just a slither of damage, and actually deal almost equal in return due to the Rocky Helmet. Flare Blitz coming out from that Incineroar, targeting down into the Landorus that has now switched in, going to be able to take that much better than the Zacian would have been able to, but still, coming onto the field and taking a third of damage could be significant later on in the game.
Every bit of chip damage is going to help, and doing almost half is very good damage to the Landorus. It could put it in range of something like a Foul Play in the future from the Yveltal. So yeah, very nice switch in for both players. The Landorus is going to be putting a lot more pressure onto the Incineroar and the Amoonguss, and the Amoonguss does threaten with the Spores once again. You don't have the threat of the huge damage coming out from the Zacian. Should be able to take anything from the Landorus, unless it is carrying the Psychic that has been picking up in popularity to be able to deal with Pokemon like Amoonguss and Urshifu. That should be strong enough, but if it's just Earth Power, the Amoonguss should be able to survive. We'll have to see if it's going to be carrying a Mental Herb as well, because otherwise it's just going to be taunted from the Umbreon again.
Yeah, and I mean, the Earth Power is going to be good targeting here, because it's tempting to go into that Incineroar, but knowing the Yveltal can just switch in will leave it null and void. And going like down into the Amoonguss, getting significant damage on it would be great, but not when there's a Protect. Unfortunately, nothing is going to be able to penetrate that Protect in a non-dynamized format at this stage here. Taunt going to come out, and again, the Protect from Amoonguss just preserving itself from the double up that Sanghyeon had gone for here.
Very nice repositioning to get that Yveltal back on the field, get the Intimidate and the Fake Out back in the back again, so it can switch in on the potential Landorus and the Zacian that's going to be coming in the future. Maybe the Landorus is in range of a Foul Play. It's going to be pretty close, because Landorus Incarnate are usually specially trained. It still has some pretty decent physical attack though, so Foul Play would still be hurting it. So it'll be very close if it is able to pick up a knockout. There's not really too much that's threatening this Umbreon at this point. It's probably going to be able to sit on the field for most of the match at this point, especially with having access to Taunt. You can just put a stop to the Spores that can come up from the Amoonguss. You can shrug off any of the attacks the Yveltal's going to want to go for as well. But actually, I'm going to eat my words here. It's not going to stay on the field for the entire match. It's switching straight out into the Zacian.
No, but it does still have its HP intact, and like you said, you know, Umbreon's one of those Pokemon that can sit on the field, so maybe when it returns, it might just be able to have that sustainability to last out through the game. Amoonguss, however, also going to dash on out of there, and the Landorus is going to come on for the opposing side of the field, and of course, two flying types on the field, Earth Powers are not going to connect anywhere. Snarl is coming out from the Yveltal here. This is going to be good against that Landorus. We've seen that it is obviously favoring that special variety with those Earth Powers, so just going to negate the offensive pressure there. Zacian not going to mind that at all, and does manage to get itself on the field.
So we've got the mirrors now with the Landorus Incarnates, but Panyawut is definitely in a stronger position at this point. The Landorus on Sanghyeon's side of the field, it's not going to be doing too much damage here. It won't be able to Earth Power either Pokemon. With its coverage move usually being Sludge Bomb, it's not going to do any damage to the Yveltal or the Landorus at this point, especially with the Snarl. Maybe in range of another Snarl as well. It was very close if that was going to be a two-hit knockout. And if you're not comfortable with that, you could be going for the Foul Play instead to pick up the knockout.
Yeah,
would still be
Landorus
doing
just
some
going
good
to be
damage to
switching
whatever's
out.
going to be switching in.
Unfortunately, my screen has glitched there,
That's
Jamie. Are
supposed
you
to be
able
as
to
well,
see
but
the
it
map
looks like
at
the
all?
Rillaboom is doing a
Oh
kill,
no.
actually.
Oh, there we go. Rillaboom jumping in for the action here. Going to be setting that grassy terrain on the field. As Ashen's just going to go for a protect and benefit from a little grassy terrain recovery at the end of the turn. Sucker Punch, of course, failing here. There's no offensive pressure coming out from Sanghyeon's side of the field. Both protects and obviously switching in with the Rillaboom. So a little bit of recovery. And of course, that's a nice kind of snide comment to the opposing side with their flying types. Can't benefit from any recovery. Not that they need it right now, Jamie.
Still at full HP, still very healthy for Panyawut's side of the field. The damage to the Amoonguss has been regenerated most likely as well at this point. So yeah, everything is still pretty healthy. Everyone's just switching around trying to get that good position at this point. And now you've got fake out pressure on Sanghyeon's side of the field. You can put a stop to the Earth Power coming out from the Landorus. That could allow you to get a huge amount of damage into either Pokemon at this point. And we've already seen that the Zacian does carry Substitute as well, so it could be going for that Substitute, just try and get that up to block any more damage here. And the Landorus is definitely not going to be doing any damage this turn. It is going to be protecting itself.
Yeah, this could be nice if the fake out was going into the Yveltal, but it looks like it was targeting down into that Landorus here. Zacian does indeed go for the substitutes, just going to go hide behind its decoy once again, but Yveltal going for the foul play. If this goes into the Zacian, which it does, we know that it is capable of breaking that substitute. So, not a lot of damage being dealt out here, other than the Zacian to itself.
It's pretty much put itself just below half HP, getting that little bit extra recovery to put it back over half. But it's done 2 substitutes at this point, and you've just broken it with the foul play both times. You haven't launched off any attacks with the Zacian at this point, and that's where most of your damage is coming from. So if you've lost half HP on your Zacian at this point, should definitely be in range of the Earth Power coming out from the Landorus. We'll have to see if the Landorus is able to survive an attack from the Zacian. A lot of players are now EVing their Landorus to be able to survive that attack, but then you've got the Rillaboom next to it as well. You could be going for the combination of Grassy Glide and Behemoth Blade into the Landorus. Because that Pokemon did just go for the Protect this turn, didn't want to take the extra chip from the Fake Out, that could have put it in range of the Behemoth Blade, but that means that you can safely attack into that slot now.
Well, once again, a switch occurring. The Yveltal's going to leave the field in place of this Incineroar, throwing the Intimidate down against both these physical attackers. And of course, now there's no substitute to contend with. The Intimidate can reduce that Intrepid Sword. Grassy Glide going to come out from the Rillaboom, connecting into that Landorus, but with the Intimidate, really not going to be dealing too much at all. And Behemoth Blade is going to be followed up by the Zacian here, targeting down into that Landorus as well. So Sanghyeon really wanted to try and remove this Pokemon from the field, but with the Intimidate, it's not going to be possible. Finally, we get to see an Earth Power connect, though, even if it is on the opposing side into the Zacian, and of course, it's strong enough to pick up the KO, and Zacian will return to its Pokeball.
So that Intimidate coming in clutch to allow that Landorus to survive. Would have gone down to the combination of those 2 attacks without that Intimidate. So really good switch in there. Taking out the restricted Pokemon on Sanghyeon's side of the field. That's really freed up the Yveltal at this point. There's not really going to be anything that's threatening it too much at this point. Rillaboom's not going to be able to hit it very well at all. Landorus, it's got to have some rock coverage somewhere to be able to hit it. Otherwise, it's really not going to do much damage at all. Can't even get a poison with something like a Sludge Bomb because of the sheer force. And Umbreon's not going to do any damage at this point. So I'm really struggling to see a way through this Yveltal, unless there is a rock move waiting on that Landorus at this point. Maybe the Umbreon will eventually be able to outstall the Yveltal, because even though the Umbreon can't hit the Yveltal very well, it can't be hit by the Yveltal either. So yeah, losing the Zacian very early has really freed up this Yveltal.
Yeah, it could really be the battle of the dark types towards the end game here. Going to be a double switch coming out from Panyawut, though. We're going to see the Amoonguss rejoin the field, as well as that Yveltal. Looks like the leads from this game are actually right back on the field. Landorus is going to go for the Earth Power, but again, going into the flying type here, so not going to be able to connect. The Rillaboom, however, going to be able to find a little bit of damage on that Amoonguss with the U-turn, but again, Rocky Helmet being so great at the moment, constantly dealing back that chip damage, almost equal to what damage the Amoonguss has been dealt itself. So although the Rillaboom can reset that Intimidate, like you said, Jamie, there's not a lot to be able to contend with this Yveltal, and even if there is a rock move on that Landorus, Landorus is at very low HP. It could easily get KO'd in the next turn or 2.
Yeah, maybe if the Amoonguss is carrying Grass Knot even, it would be able to pick up the KO at this point. It's going to be in range of whatever attack the Yveltal would want to go for. Maybe survive the Snarl at this point, but you don't really need to drop the special attack of the Umbreon or the Rillaboom that could switch in either. So really, you just get to pick up the knockout on the Landorus with whatever you want from the Yveltal. If you want to go for the Rage Powder just to really ensure that you're going to be able to pick up the knockout, then you would be able to as well. But there's really nothing that can threaten this Yveltal at this point. The only real way through it would have been something like a Play Rough. Even the Behemoth Blade from the Zacian would have been able to do some very good damage to it. But yeah, there's really no damage potential left on Sanghyeon's side of the field. It looks like the forfeit was going to be locked in there, so Panyawut should be taking this first game.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I think you called it perfectly there, Jamie. There really wasn't a way to get through to that Yveltal, and even though yes, you have kind of the Umbreon there, that starts really playing into that kind of time game there. You're just going to have to start really playing for time and stalling things out, and maybe Umbreon just didn't have the utility to pull it through. And I think it is good to kind of go for the forfeit here, reset going into game two, and that's why we play best of three sets. You can always come back from just losing the first game.
And you've got time to think of what you're going to be adjusting here. You've got Pokemon like the Politoed and the Zapdos that were left on the bench for this first game. Zapdos is going to be a Pokemon that can break through the Yveltal. You'll have to take some snarls on the way, but it's at least going to be able to hit it with super effective damage. Maybe if it's carrying the access to Roost, it would still be able to beat the Yveltal eventually, because it would be able to resist the healing move from the Yveltal, the potential Oblivion Wing, and then be able to outstall it with just some Thunderbolts. Could be snarled down, but then should be able to roost itself up. So that would definitely be a way through the Yveltal. But then you've got to contend with something like the Landorus that would be immune to the electric type attacks, the Amoonguss that's going to redirect it away. If you do have access to Hurricane, you'll still be able to hit the Amoonguss pretty well. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see the Zapdos coming to this match. It does do very well into the Yveltal. If you're just bringing the Zacian as your way to hit the Yveltal, and then you end up losing it, there's going to be no real way to break through Yveltal anymore. So we'll have to see what kind of adjustments are going to be brought here for Sanghyeon, because you still need to be able to break through the Yveltal, and Zacian really can't be the only Pokemon you're bringing to do that.
Yeah, no, I really think you're right. Zapdos could be a really good pivotal Pokemon here. Like you said, you could go for those Hurricanes into that Amoonguss and having the electric type moves. Going to be able to hit a lot of the targets on the opposing side. Also carrying that Rocky Helmet. When we saw this a lot last week, where a lot of the contact moves were obviously getting that static onto the opposing Pokemon. So possibly with a few of those static rolls and a little Rocky Helmet damage, it could certainly turn the tide of a match.
We saw the Rocky Helmet adding up from the Amoonguss as well on Panyawut's side of the field. See, it was taking pretty much as much damage as the Rocky Helmet was inflicting. So if the Rocky Helmet is going to come into play on the Zapdos, that could be really crucial for Sanghyeon here.
Well, Panyawut leading out with dual dark types with the Incineroar and the Yveltal, whereas Sanghyeon has gone for the Rillaboom and the Zacian. So both restricted on the field, but that Intimidate is going to be detrimental to Sanghyeon here, going to be negating that Intrepid Sword, and Rillaboom will have to take an Intimidate as well. And we saw how little damage that Rillaboom is capable of dealing once that Intimidate is put in place.
It's still going to at least reduce the damage of the foul play that could come out from the Yveltal, so you're not going to be doing as much damage to the Zacian or the Rillaboom at least. But yeah, leading into the Incineroar with both Zacian and Rillaboom, at least you get the fake out pressure going, because your Rillaboom should be faster at this point. You could choose to just trade fake outs into the Yveltal and the Incineroar fakes out the Zacian, or you've got the opportunity to be able to fake out the Incineroar at this point. That could free up the Zacian to get a huge amount of damage into this Yveltal. Whether that's something with the Behemoth Blades, you'd hope it would be over something like the Play Rough, because the Amoonguss has just switched in.
Yeah, I like this Amoonguss switching in and the fake out going into the Incineroar. I was going to say this could give Zacian the opportunity to go for a substitute, but instead the Play Rough, which actually misses onto that Amoonguss, particularly with the switch out, the fake out targeting correctly there, could have been a great substitute opportunity.
Yeah, that would have been a very good substitute opportunity for the Zacian, but fearing the potential foul play that could have come out from the Yveltal to be able to break it at this point. And now you have revealed that the Play Rough is on that Zacian at this point. You should be able to deduce with the substitute as well, there's no fighting type attack. That could free up the stack attacker in the future if Sanghyeon's able to take this second game as well. And going for the Play Rough instead of the Behemoth Blade did end up missing. Wouldn't have done too much damage to the switching in Amoonguss anyway. Should be able to, at least you don't take any Rocket Helmet as well on the Amoonguss. So maybe it was actually beneficial that the Play Rough ended up missing. If you'd gone for the Behemoth Blade, that would have still been able to do a very good chunk to the Amoonguss. But now's the opportunity to be able to set up that substitute.
Yeah, very true. Don't have to worry about the foul play from the Yveltal. Substitute is in play. As Rillaboom does go for the U-turn, we've seen this as a good strategy for Rillaboom to reset that Intimidate, and then you also have the fake out utility later on in the game. And it gives Sanghyeon the opportunity to bring in that Landorus as well and apply some Earth Power pressure to that opposing Incineroar. Incineroar is going to go for the parting shot, doesn't have to contend with any Umbreon taunts as we saw in game one, but it is going to catch that Landorus on the switch in here, so it will have its special attack brought down by one stage.
So not going to be doing as much damage with the Landorus. It's going to free up the Amoonguss a little bit and maybe able to survive the attacks coming out from the Zacian and the Landorus, because you've got that Intimidate down onto the Zacian, and now you've got the drop on the Landorus. Amoonguss is a pretty bulky Pokemon, and it did avoid the damage coming out from the Play Rough, so it's still sitting at full HP at this point. And maybe able to survive and then get the Spore off into the Landorus. And Landorus is going to be joining the field for Panyawut as well, so now you're going to be able to threaten the Earth Powers to very easily break that substitute. But yeah, you're not going to be even going to take any Earth Powers because you're already sporing the Landorus on Sanghyeon's side of the field.
Oh, Amoonguss finally getting to do what Amoonguss does best and go for that Spore. Zacian's going to get a little bit of recovery as well from the grassy terrain, putting it in good stead to possibly get another substitute up later on in the game.
This is going to allow the opportunity to go for something like an Earth Power and a Spore into the Zacian, because you'd be able to break the substitute first and then put it to sleep. The Landorus on Sanghyeon's side of the field is not doing anything this turn, it's guaranteed to stay asleep. And even if it was able to move, it's not going to threaten the opposing Landorus Incarnate, and not too much damage into the Amoonguss either because of that earlier parting shot.
Well, the double up with the Earth Power and Spore is certainly a threat, so Zacian is just going to go for a Protect on this particular turn. You can see Landorus actually going for a substitute here. Brilliant play here by Panyawut, capitalizing on the fact that Landorus, like you said, guaranteed to take its first turn of sleep, and the Zacian was in a tricky situation. Not only that, but Amoonguss goes, hey, I can capitalize on this too. Goes for the Self-Pollen Puff and will regain all of that delicious HP taken from the substitute. What a fantastic turn for Panyawut.
Incredibly free substitute, and you didn't even take any damage because of that pollen puff. So yeah, really good play coming out from Panyawut. The substitute has somewhat dropped off on Landorus a little bit because you do want access to things like the rock type attacks to be able to deal with Pokemon like Volcarona, but the substitute coming in really clutch here.
Yeah, Zacian, however, is going to go on the offensive now, going for that Behemoth Blade, targeting down into the substitute of that Landorus. Sanghyeon really wants to get that broken so you can start dealing some good damage to it while it's not hiding. And there we go. It is exposed once again. But will the Landorus for Sanghyeon actually wake up a little bit later on? Earth Power going to connect on Zacian. Of course, we know this is going to be able to break the substitutes. The substitutes didn't really last long in this game. You know, they're there for that one turn, but now both Pokemon are back out. And the action as Landorus does wake up. All the excitement with the substitutes is able to connect the Earth Power, but you can see Amoonguss is able to take that really well. You're going to need another 2 of those to pick up the KO against Amoonguss, and Amoonguss able to go for that Spore. So Zacian not only has a substitute broken, but will go to sleep this turn as well.
Means you pretty much freely get to fire off an Earth Power into that Zacian slot. Only a Zapdos switch in would be able to take that at this point. The Rillaboom should be able to shrug it off at least. Maybe if you switch in the Rillaboom in case the Amoonguss is going for a Spore into that slot as well. Because if you're switching in the Zapdos, that could be still Spored on the switch in at this point. Because the Amoonguss is not going to be KO'd this turn. The Zacian is guaranteed to stay asleep at least for this turn. And we've seen that the Earth Power is not enough to knock out the Amoonguss in 2 shots thanks to that earlier parting shot. So Zacian is going to be switching out here. And it does look like it is going to be the Zapdos. So could potentially be seeing a Spore into that slot.
Yeah, we're actually going to see the double switch here. Like you said, you know, the Earth Power going into that slot could have obviously done a lot of damage to the Zacian, but it's a good switch in here for the Zapdos, particularly when you see the Amoonguss returning as well. A Veltal joining the field is going to be a good target for those electric type moves coming forward. Landorus is going to go for that Earth Power, but to no avail. We've got the flying type on the field as the grassy terrain does fade as well. So Rillaboom might have to try and get that set up later on in the match.
It's always a little bit unfortunate timing when the Rillaboom hits the field and then the grassy terrain disappears. At least you still have fake out pressure at this turn. Doesn't rely on the priority that the grassy glide needs with the grassy terrain. And so you can still go for a fake out this turn. If you fake out the Landorus, then you can just freely go for the Thunderbolt into the opposing Yveltal as well. Maybe the Zapdos isn't going to be threatened by this opposing Landorus because it does have substitute. It may not carry any rock coverage.
Yep, going to be the Zacian rejoining the field here, so that grass terrain can be set up a little bit later on, and obviously getting up that Intrepid Sword boost as well as Landorus goes for another substitute here. Knows the Zapdos can't really, you know, do anything to it at this stage, and the Rillaboom either, you know, isn't going to go for the attack or try to switch as well. Snarl is going to come out, connect onto that opposing Zapdos. That could be critical later on for these electric type moves. Zacian, of course, not going to worry about that too much. It's literally taking a nap. It's got no worries whatsoever. Landorus going to avoid the Hurricane though.
Yeah, so that's a free substitute once again. Landorus would have probably lost its substitute if that Hurricane would have connected, even with that Snarl landing on the opposing Zapdos. The Yveltal outspeeding the Zapdos as well. That means that this Zapdos is going to be a pretty bulky one, and now it's not going to be doing too much damage with its Thunderbolts either into the opposing Yveltal. And you get the opportunity again to just go for another Snarl. The Zacian was still guaranteed to stay asleep this turn. It's still guaranteed to stay asleep when it comes back in because it's now switched into the Landorus.
Yep, Landorus joining the field. It's the Landorus on the opposing side, goes for the Sludge Bomb, connects onto that Zapdos, does a huge chunk of damage actually, could be quite significant towards this endgame. As Snarl comes out once again, connects, takes the Zapdos down into the red, and that will be a -2 special attack. Really unfortunate for it, and of course for this Landorus as well, having its special attack reduced. Zapdos, however, goes, I don't need my special attack stat, I am going for the Thunder Wave, and it's just going to bring that Yveltal's speed down. So you just mentioned kind of the criticalness of those kind of speed differences, and now Zapdos is trying to change that up a little bit.
Would have allowed you to go for the Roost before the Yveltal would have been able to go for any of those Snarls. Wouldn't have been affected by a Sucker Punch either, so if it had a bit more HP it would have been able to go for a Roost, but it's such low HP at this point, Landorus should be able to pick it off with a Sludge Bomb at this point, so that might be why the Zapdos is switching out into the Zacian here.
Yeah, and particularly if it's a Sludge Bomb going into a Steel type, not going to be dealing any damage at all, but potentially you know, the Landorus could call this and could go for that Earth Power here. But no, it's just going to be that Sludge Bomb. Zacian coming in, not going to obviously take any damage from it. As Landorus goes for the Rock Slide, but does avoid on that opposing Yveltal. A lot of misses coming out from Sanghyeon's side of the field today, as Yveltal can go for that foul play, targeting down into that Landorus and does a very significant chunk of damage there.
See the high attack high physical attack coming out for the Landorus there. Foul play is still able to do a very nice chunk, and it's still very awkward for Sanghyeon, especially because that Zacian still hasn't taken its first turn of guaranteed sleep, and that means it's going to be open to something like an Earth Power from the Landorus. If you go for a foul play into that slot, it's still going to be hurting it as well. It's not really too much that's threatening Panyawut's side of the field at this point. It does have Rock Slide on the Landorus Incarnate at this point, but that's still going to be spread damage, and it's not going to be doing too much to the Yveltal. It will still be doing a nice chunk, and definitely more than anything like a Sludge Bomb would have been able to do. Maybe enough to be able to break the substitute on the opposing Landorus as well. Should be able to now that it's gone for at least for the first Rock Slide. And the Yveltal there probably going for a Sucker Punch that did fail thanks to that paralysis.
Yeah, paralysis actually coming in clutch here. The Landorus is going to go for the Earth Power though, into the opposing Zacian. Took its first turn of sleep and unfortunately will not wake up in this game too. Straight KO from the Earth Power, and it will be able to retreat to its Pokeball. The Landorus, however, is going to go for the Rock Slide, and this time finally does manage to connect, but you can see the damage it's doing to the Yveltal is actually significantly underwhelming at this stage. You're going to need a lot more of those paralysis activations to be able to deal significant damage to this opposing Yveltal.
Yeah, and Rock Slide is usually just for Pokemon like Volcarona that is four times super effective against. You don't really need your attack at that point because it's going to be doing so much damage with the weaknesses. But when it's only 2 times, the Rock Slide's really not going to be cutting it, especially because Yveltal's such a bulky Pokemon. You've lost your Zacian now, so the Play Rough can't connect with that Yveltal anymore. The Zapdos is so low, it's in range of the Sludge Bomb at this point. That would have been the only real way of breaking through the Yveltal once again. And yeah, it looks like Sanghyeon knows it, and this game is going to Panyawut and Thailand.
Yeah, fantastic play there. Panyawut was able to play so strongly with some really good defensive switches. And actually, when you kind of look at the damage taken from Panyawut's team, it was very minimal. Sanghyeon just wasn't able to deal significant damage and get these Pokemon in range of a KO. And like you said in game 1, and we could see it there towards the end of game 2, the Yveltal was just going to be able to sit there. There wasn't a lot of damage that could be dealt to it.
I think the only attack that Zacian went for that game was a Play Rough that missed an Amoonguss. So if that's your restricted and is not doing anything, if it's just sitting on the field, just substituting over again, but not dealing out the damage, then you're effectively playing without a restricted at that point. It dropped so easily to the Earth Powers coming out from the Landorus Incarnate. It wasn't really too much threatening that Pokemon either. If you're trying to cover for the Yveltal, not really getting the Landorus Incarnate either. As soon as the Zacian goes to sleep, that's your best way of breaking through both Yveltal and Landorus. When that's put a stop to, and then you're not really going to break the Pokemon anymore.
Yeah, no, very true. And at the end of the day, you've got to get those KOs in order to start winning out the match. And just unfortunately, it wasn't the case for Sanghyeon in this particular one. Still, fantastic Pokemon play, and it was lovely to see Landorus showcase so much, since we talked about it a little bit kind of when we were looking at the team preview of the Pokemon, to be able to see it showcase so nicely on this World Cup stage.
So that's going to be it, at least for Thailand and South Korea for now, but they will be joining us once again later on in the stream. But we will be jumping into a short break, and we'll be right back for Spain versus the United States.